Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our publishing and coaching services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by Troy Anderson, author of Trumpocalypse. Troy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me on. It's a great privilege.
Are you ready to get started?
Sure.
All right, question number one. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
The most important thing in writing a book is to think through, the chapter outlines. If you take the time, especially if you write a book proposal, but if you at least take the time to think through the titles of all the different chapters and how it all flows together. If you're writing a nonfiction book, if you think about the kind of arguments you're going to make to back up essentially the thesis of your book, that's the most important thing. And then the other big tip is to edit constantly as you're going through it and rewrite. Edit and rewrite constantly until you get to a point where you've got perfect prose and it all flows together and makes sense.
Absolutely. Well, what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
Yeah, the hardest part is getting your first book published. And one of the keys, our first book was called The Babylon Code. It's an investigative expose of globalism combined with a investigation into the Bible's greatest mystery, Mystery Babylon Revelation. And at the time, we had a major filmmaker who actually got a hold of me and wanted me to write a book along these lines and then turn it into a film. And so that gave me a leg up. But one of the keys in getting published is to find an agent. And so I sent out a few query letters to different literary agents, and luckily this one agency, a new guy had just come on board, and I left a voicemail on his phone, and he got it, and so I became his first client. And it's just one of the top literary agencies in the country. So that's how it happened for me. But the key was writing a killer, like 1.5 page query letter to really get them interested, and then that got essentially the secretary interested. She allowed me to leave a voicemail on his phone. I left a intriguing voicemail on his phone. That was the secret for our first book.
So you went the traditional publisher route, is that correct?
Yeah, but both books have been published by FaithWords Hachette. FaithWords is a imprint of Hachette's, the world's third largest publishing house. And so, yeah, but both these books, they're part of a series. The Babylon Code and Trumpocalypse are published by traditional publishers.
Well, let's talk a little bit about marketing. So please share a marketing strategy that you've used in your book launch that worked well.
I've been a journalist for 27 years. I worked at the LA Daily News for many years, and I write for a variety of different news outlets. So that gave me the ability to use all those contacts to get a hold of different reporters and editors and producers I've known over the years, and get them interested in doing a story or inviting us on their TV show or radio show to talk about the book. And so that's been key. So if you have the ability to write articles for different media outlets that might be interested in the topic of your book, or make some kind of contact with a TV producer or radio producer that might be interested in your kind of book before the book comes out, if you sort of expand this network out, then several months before the time for the book to come out, you can have your publisher, or you can go ahead and send them an early copy, a galley of the book, along with the press release, and get them interested. And so that helps you to sort of hit the ground running and get your publicity machine rolling. And if you have the money to hire a book PR firm or some kind of firm to help you promote your book, is always a big plus. Most of the your very well-known authors hire publicists and book publicity firms to really give them a leg up in promoting the book and lining up interviews.
Absolutely. Now, what advice would you give to our listeners who are writing their first book and may not have those type of connections? How would they be able to reach out to these shows?
Yeah, so I mean, it's if you go on the websites of most media outlets, if you sort of poke around long enough, and sort of put the pieces to the puzzle together, you can often find the email for a producer or some kind of high up person and on the show. Sometimes you might have to go on Twitter and track down their email or get a hold of them on Twitter. That's often an easy way to get a hold of people that you can't find their email, and just simply use that as an opportunity to pitch your book. If it's on Twitter, you only got a short, a few words to pitch them, but oftentimes because attention spans are so short today, that if you have a catchy little pitch that might work, and then certainly in an email you can give them a lot more, and you can send them your press release. The other big tip is social media is huge nowadays with promoting books. So if you can build up like an author page on Facebook, and build up a following on Twitter and Instagram and Google and these different social media sites before your book comes out, then once it comes out, you can use those pages. You can spend a little bit of money and boost posts, and that can help reach tens of thousands of people with information about your book. And so those are two of the key strategies to helping propel a book into a bestseller.
Well, and you mentioned using Twitter. Are you talking about when you go on those pages, you're sending them like DMs, or what's the best way to suggest them to reach out via Twitter?
Yeah. You can just send a direct message to people on Twitter. So if you go on a website, let's say you want to get a hold of the editor at Newsweek or something like that. If you go on the website, it's probably very difficult to find an email address for an editor or even a book editor or somebody like that. But if you go on Twitter, you just sort of type in their name. Often, if they have an unusual name, you can find their Twitter address, and then they just send them a message. Say, hey, I've got this book. It's on this topic, and I wonder if you'd be interested, or if somebody at your news outlet might be interested in this story. And of course, when you're pitching reporters and editors, you want to pitch them a story, not just your book, but what's the story they're going to get out of it, because they've got to go to their boss and their editor and say, hey, I got this interesting story, and this guy's offering it to me, and if it all works out, then they may do a story on your book or the sort of the news that comes out of your book.
Yeah, storytelling is critical, and it's much better than just giving that sales pitch, because you can really build relationships and branding with really utilizing storytelling. It makes such a difference.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, let's talk about your favorite book. So, what is your favorite book, and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
Yeah, the book that completely changed my life was Hal Lindsey's The Late Great Planet Earth. It came out I think in 1970. I read it when I was 11 years old. In 1979, and it's a book that was it was the best-selling nonfiction book of the 1970s. Sold I think over 35 million copies, and it popularized the whole genre of Bible prophecy. And he actually teamed up with a newspaper reporter who was a really good writer, and she just she took the stuff that he had learned at Dallas Theological Seminary about prophecy and made it really simple and easy to understand and easy to follow and read, and that just really inspired a lifelong interest and love of Bible prophecy. I mean, that then all these decades later, I've written these books on Bible prophecy. In fact, the youth minister led me to the Lord when I was 11. He'd actually trained under Hal Lindsey at the UCLA Light and Powerhouse Seminary at UCLA, and learned all this stuff from Lindsey. And he actually gave me a copy of that book. I remember just sitting on a sandy cliff overlooking the 101 in small town Oregon and reading that in two different nights, and it's just a real great book.
And for a final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
Yeah, my favorite quote is, "There's no such thing as chance, and what seems to us merest accident springs from the deepest source of destiny." That's a quote from Friedrich von Schiller. He's the poet who wrote the poem Ode to Joy that Ludwig van Beethoven set to music in the Ninth Symphony. He wrote a number of famous plays, Don Carlos, which George Lucas cited as an inspiration for Star Wars, William Tell, Marie Stuart about Mary Queen of Scots, and some others. And he's one of my like a great grandfather. When I was little, my grandmother would encourage me to follow in his footsteps and become a writer, and so I did. And he was hugely influential in my life too.
Well, Troy, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. What is the best way for people to find you online?
Yeah, my website's troyanderson.us, and then a secondary website I also help people co-author and ghostwrite books. That's TroyAndersonWriter.com.
Well, Troy, I want to thank you once again for being a guest on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how to get your book published with a proven system that works, grab a free copy of my book at getpublishedpodcast.com.